shall we say. So, all right, I guess it's time for me to talk about Tommy by The Who, isn't it?
Tommy, can you hear me?
Yes, and if you want to hear a tidbit before I introduce the segments, this is one of my mom's favorite albums, so I want to shout out this segment to her. And my mom actually was the singing voice for her CYO's performance of Tommy, despite the fact that she was female. It was progressive, I guess, before its time. My mom was the singing voice for Tommy in the CYO of Trenton's 1970 production of Tommy by The Who. At
CYO?
That they performed. Yes, Catholic Youth Organization, Matt.
Oh,
so,
okay.
yep, the youth group for so this one.
They
this
did this
one
with
was
Catholics
a big,
did this
and my
performance?
That was the Jesuits. You know what I mean? There used to be progressive Catholics back in the day. So, and my mom and dad have seen Tommy performed in person several times. So I know I'm the person who least tends to talk about family connections, but the Who are a shared love of both of my parents, especially this album. So anyway, the Who Tommy is the third Who album that we've done, and their fourth studio album. You know, you can dig back in the archives for Who Sells Out, I should say, and Who Sings My Generation. In earlier segments. This was released on May 23rd, 1969, and comes in with a robust run length of 75 minutes and 15 seconds, thus making it Josh's favorite recording technique, the double album. This, if you haven't figured this out already, and this is going to be a theme when The Who goes into anything that's called a rock opera, and a lot of their songwriting, you guys probably can guess, but I'll throw it out there. Who composes things that are called rock operas for The Who? Matt? Who composes them?
Pete Townsend.
Yes. You got it. Whenever there's something that is, whether it be The Who Sells Out, a concept album, or this, or Quadrophenia, it's always Pete Townsend.
No, I'll be honest. I was trying to think of Pete Townsend's Driver, that slappy guy, whatever we talked about, whatever that Skippy.
Yep.
He did a song, and I was trying to think of that name, and I couldn't come up with it. Speedy Keen.
Speedy Keen. Yep, there you go.
I was trying to do that. It didn't work, so I'm sorry.
Sorry, man. So that was my attempt to bring you guys into it. I'll go back into doing a long cold read right here.
Don't forget
go ahead, Josh.
The songs. You didn't introduce the songs yet.
Let me introduce this. Jeez, oh man. Okay. Well, the song that I'm going to play before this is going to be Pinball Wizard, which you may have heard of, and the song in the opening montage was I'm Free. So here, all right, thanks, Josh, for doing that, so we don't have to hear your omniscient voice come in and remediate me along the way.
You had like a 2 or 3 week stretch there without Josh having to interrupt that. So
I know.
So
see if we
can break that.
We can see if I get through that and the closing and not screw that up. That's my two white whales in terms of getting
too long into it before.
Well, it's good you came in, Josh, because I was about to ask the following question. Would you like me to give you a couple paragraph synopsis of the plot of this album?
I can't wait.
Would you like it, or should I just leave it alone? All right. So I'll try my best to make this. So it's important to know that this storyline of this album, which has often been sort of maligned for not being necessarily the most coherent storyline, which is something when you hear concept albums in 1960s tends to be something that often comes with it. As you know, we've covered SF Sorrow by the Pretty Things and some other concept albums, and the plot gets lost at certain times. But Townsend was following a guy by the name of Meher Baba at this time, who was a spiritual leader who basically called himself God on Earth, and he stayed a practitioner of his teachings. I think to this very day, he still subscribes to some of them, but certainly throughout the 70s and 80s. And so this was his attempt at taking Mr. Baba's teachings and turning them into music. So here is, and it's never been described by Townsend exactly what the plot is, but here's what, as much as, can be hashed out, what people have sort of collectively thought the synopsis of the album is. British Army Captain Walker goes missing during an expedition and is believed dead, and that is what's covered in the song Overture. His wife, Mrs. Walker, gives birth to their son Tommy, the song It's a Boy. Years later, Captain Walker returns home and discovers that his wife has found a new lover. The captain kills the lover in an altercation. Tommy's mother then brainwashes him into believing he didn't see or hear anything, shutting down his senses and making him deaf, dumb, and blind to the outside world. 1921. That's the song, 1921. Tommy now relies on his sense of touch and imagination, developing a fascinating inner psyche, which is covered in Amazing Journey and Sparks. A quack doctor claims his wife can cure Tommy, as covered in the song The Hawker, while Tommy's parents are increasingly frustrated that he will never find religion in the midst of his isolation, covered in Christmas. They begin to neglect him, leaving him to be tortured by his sadistic cousin Kevin and molested by his uncle Ernie. Fiddle About is the song that covers that. The Hawker's drug-addicted wife, as covered in The Acid Queen, gives Tommy a dose of LSD, causing a hallucinogenic experience that is expressed musically in Underture. And we'll talk about Underture, but when you know that's what it is, it definitely gives it another layer. As Tommy grows older, he discovers that he can feel vibrations sufficiently well enough to become an expert pinball player, pinball wizard. His parents take him to a respected doctor, the song There's a Doctor, who determines that the boy's disabilities are psychosomatic rather than physical. Tommy is told by the doctor to go to the mirror, as expressed in that track, and his doctors notice he can stare at his reflection. After seeing Tommy spend extended periods staring at a mirror in the house, his mother smashes it out of frustration, as covered in the song Smash the Mirror. This removes Tommy's mental block, and he recovers his senses, realizing he can become a powerful leader of men, as covered in Sensation. He starts a religious movement, I'm Free, which generates fervor amongst its adherents, such as Sally Simpson, and expands into a holiday camp, Welcome/Tommy's Holiday Camp, the song. However, Tommy's followers ultimately reject his teachings and leave the camp, as covered in We're Not Gonna Take It. Tommy retreats inward again, as seen in See Me, Feel Me, with his continuing statement of wonder at what encompasses him. End of Parable. Did you guys get all that as you listened to it the first time around?
Nope.
Wow. I will say this. I have known this album for a while. I never knew that it was a psychosomatic thing. I thought he was just born deaf, dumb, and blind, like a Helen Keller type thing.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, no, it's definitely, if you listen to the lyrics, you can tell that they allude to it being psychosomatic multiple times. Yeah. I think that a lot of people just know that, that deaf, dumb, blind kid sure plays a mean pit, and that's kind of what you lock into, but there's a lot of songs before you get there. Yeah. So, well, anyway, 20 million people bought this album over the years, and it is in the Grammy Hall of Fame. The album took 6 months to make, leading to a long period of touring where they toured throughout all of 1969 and all of 1970, and played this album at Woodstock, the Isle of Wight Festival in both 1969 and 1970, and the Met Opera House. They also brought this back at multiple times during their career and played it full length in the 70s and the 80s at different times, and would sprinkle songs in during live performances all the way up through the 2000s. Couple other things. Tommy also was Townsend trying to co-opt the 3-minute pop single format that The Who, he felt, had kind of gotten stale with, and so this was his attempt to sort of subvert that. At the time this album was released, the band was kind of in a commercial drought, which we talked about a little bit in The Who Sell Out. They were still, it was kind of like the Kinks, where they were successful, but they were kind of looked at as maybe their time had passed as a revolutionary band. So this was an attempt to bring back relevance. And it worked because it was extremely popular with critics and fans pretty much immediately. And Townsend did say the album was designed to be consciously different, specifically than what the Beatles were doing and the Beach Boys in the Pet Sounds type era of stuff, and that it would be specifically designed to be played live. And if you remember, the Beach Boys were not really playing live. Brian Wilson wasn't out there, and the Beatles really weren't touring a lot by 1969 either. He made this to be, that's what I'm saying. So he made this to be played live, and all the songs had that in mind. You may notice the French horn is in this album is played by John Entwistle, as well as the organ and the piano, which Townsend played. And also, this is the debut of Keith Moon playing his brand new double bass drum kit. And you hear him play the double bass drum kit a lot in this. His fills and the way that he hits the drums, it sounds very different, certainly than the albums we've heard before. But you may not recognize it because so much of The Who's big anthemic songs have that brand new double bass drum kit. So if you were familiar more with 1970s Who, it's going to sound familiar to you. But if you go back and look at 60s Who, this is where Keith Moon becomes sort of that like massive towering sound that he would have. That's the double bass drum kit. A couple anecdotes about it. the song Pinball Wizard was actually specifically tailored for New York Times critic Nick Cohn, who was known to be a pinball fan. And the band sort of unabashedly said that they wrote it hoping that the New York Times would give the album a positive review. It actually this album allowed the Who to clear their debts. And in clearing their debts, they no longer really had to listen to their record company. And they credited that with not having to do what the record company said. And Townsend and Daltrey both said that that is ultimately what led to albums like Who's Next, Quadrophenia, Who by Numbers, and Who Are You, their next 4 albums. And they say that they don't think they would ever been able to make those albums if they hadn't been able to clear their debts. So they can thank Tommy for that. This hit number 2 in the UK and number 7 in the US in 1969, and then it re-entered the charts in 1970 and hit number 4 at that time. While many of the critics liked it, there were some critics that did not like it, thinking that it was sort of overwrought and overly long. And to this day, this is probably the Who album that draws the most non-consensus, I would say, in terms of some people think it's brilliant. Some people think that it's ponderous, and some people think that it's of its time, and some people think that it's timeless. So I'm actually really interested to hear what you guys think of this, because this is a lot different than a lot of what the Who had done before this, and it's different than what they do after, but does share some similarities. Josh, maybe let's start with you. What were your thoughts on Tommy?
Well, as you guys know, I had never listened to this album before, and only knew Pinball Wizard. And
that's why let's start with you.
I am decidedly in the camp of overwrought and of its time and overrated, in my opinion. I really failed to connect with this album as well, and I found it borderline offensive at times because of the idea about, for some reason, about them writing about the characters as if they were third person, as opposed to the deaf, dumb, and blind person being first person, writing from the outside versus writing as the character, maybe. For some reason that stuck with me, and I don't care about Tommy through this story, and I don't find his journey interesting, really. And I feel like this is really restrained Who. Maybe I'm so used to hearing them in the 70s, but I feel like Daltrey doesn't sing as powerfully as he does later on, or even before, I think, when we've listened to those other albums. And I feel like I don't get as much of the hard driving guitar and drums on this album.
Keith Moon agrees with you. He said it's basically them playing softer than they ever have in their career.
Yeah, and I felt that, and I don't like the Who like that. And I don't think, while the songs, I guess it's ambitious for sure, and I feel like it does succeed in telling a linear story. Like, you can follow along. Like, I was nodding my head as you were reading the descriptions of the different songs and the progression. I don't really enjoy the songs that much, and I don't feel like, with the exception of Pinball Wizard and a couple of other songs, I don't really think the writing is there for an album that's so long. And I'm not sure, maybe like you said, maybe it's different live, seeing it, or I think there's also been, I didn't end up watching the movie. I am curious to see it after this, to see what
there's a whole thing with that of who they tried to get cast in that movie.
I was reading specifically about the movie and not the albums. So yeah, I saw the whole thing about Stevie Wonder. They wanted Stevie Wonder as the Pinball Wizard.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
they did, and he was game too.
Yeah, and Ken Russell, I know the director from some other provocative 70s movies, and
full coked out Elton John was also affiliated with that, which is also awesome.
So yeah, I guess we'll start with that. It didn't really work with me. It didn't. I appreciate you telling me about the Acid Queen Underture connection, because that does make more sense now. And this album is almost as long as Trout Mask Replica, and it definitely doesn't feel as long as Drop Mask Replica, despite the
hope not.
Yeah.
Jeez, low bar.
I feel like for every like good song, there's like they're trying too hard to fill in the story with songs that are ultimately not listenable or re-listenable for me. So,
gotcha.
Matt, what are your thoughts? I know you guys have more of a relationship with
Josh.
this album.
I couldn't disagree with you more. I love this album. This is so good. It's so good. It's so good.
About?
Oh, and the more I listen to it, the more I loved listening to it this week. And I think I only listened to it. I don't think I got it 3 times the full way through, but I love it. And I have an interesting story with this record because the Who scared me for a while when I was a kid. Because I remember, like, early on when I was into hair metal and stuff, and I remember liking Motley Crue a lot, and I wanted to get their records, but my parents wouldn't let me because of censorship and all that stuff, right? So, like, I remember I had, like, a family friend. It was, like, an older guy, and he was babysitting me once, and I was just so enamored with Motley Crue, and I'm like, man, these guys must be the worst band in the world, like, that I can't listen to them. And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm saying worst band in that, like, they're just really
offensive.
Offensive, exactly. Yeah. And his response was, no, the Who is the worst. And I was like, what? He's like, the Who is the worst. And I was like, the Who? Like, my parents had that. My parents had Tommy, right? So I remember looking at the cover of this album, which I also love, and it's got these eerie guys kind of like, I don't know, like reaching out and touching like water or something with ripples in the water or whatever, and it's just got these weird faces, and I'm like, what is this album? And my parents are listening to this record. It's like, holy crap. So like, and I didn't realize like what I was talking about. Like the babysitter just hated the Who. So like for a while these guys scared me, and this album was very like traumatic. But then as I got older, I learned more about it and stuff. It's like, oh, okay, it's just like classic rock. But anyways, I digress. First of all, it's got one of my, probably I would say, one of my top 5 favorite opening tracks of all time. I love the way it opens. I think Overture is a great opening
track. Yep.
So great. It's just basically, they cover various parts of different songs in the record, and the way they combine it, and the musicianship is great. Yes, Keith Moon and John Entwistle are a little bit more in the background on this record, but you can still hear them, and it's Keith Moon's drumming is still phenomenal. Like when I listen to, The Doctor? There's a Doctor. The fills that he's doing in that, and it's almost like I would like them to turn it up. That's probably my only complaint with that. But he's doing some great fill work, drum filling in that record, or that song. And there's just I don't think there's maybe the weakest track on here for me is Welcome. Like there's something about that that's just like, oh, it's okay. But I love everything. The Hawker is great. That little guitar part, the dun, dun, and then you've got like Keith Moon on the timpani, dun, 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 dun. It's a very powerful song. I totally get it. I totally forgot about it when I was listening to this. I was like, that's a great song. And then the Entwistle songs, man, that guy writes some creepy ass songs. He's got the
that's his deal, yeah.
Yeah, he's doing the Cousin Kevin, the torturing song, and then
some creepy
the Uncle Ernie song, the molesting song, but the Cousin
That's
Kevin
what he did
song,
though. He outsourced the creepy songs to Entwistle on every album, even on the Who Sell Out, which we covered. You remember the weird song? Like they were all Entwistle songs. Yep.
Yes, and that was a good decision. The Cousin Kevin song is one of the most fascinating songs on this for me because it's a harsh song. I can't really say it's melodic, but yet it is. It's melodic in a very different way, and the chorus of that and the progression of the notes is so interesting. It's so unique, and the more I listen to it, the more I love it. It's just, and I think Pinball Wizard is a great song too. It's like in the middle of the pack for me. It's like when you have a song as good as Pinball Wizard, and I put you in the middle of the pack in terms of my favorite songs. I mean, to me, it's just a great album. It's long. I get that. It's a slog to get through the whole thing, but if you got the time, I think it pays off. The story is always kind of muddled. We talked about this before with concept albums and rock operas. Yep. It's not really that good. It was interesting to hear John give the synopsis because there were certainly bits and pieces in there that I was like, oh, I didn't know that, right? Because I just didn't. But I don't know, man. I don't know what it is. I totally disagree with you. Maybe you need to listen to it more. Maybe this just isn't your thing. But this is a classic record, and I am certainly in the camp of I can't get enough of Tommy.
All right.
Well, perfect, because I straddle the line between both of you guys. And I'll say this. My favorite versions of The Who are the proto-punk early Who and the sort of the big stadium Who that I think has kind of been over-commercialized to the point where they're underrated because their songs are played so often that you forget how great some of their songs are because CSI, for example, just, prostitutes them across the board. So those are my favorite versions of The Who because they're both versions of it. And I will also say that as rock operas by The Who go, I'll live and die by Quadrophenia, and we'll get there eventually. But that's the one that is my favorite. I think that if this album was a single album, this would be a fantastic album. I think that as a double album, it's just a little bit too long. And I think I kind of agree with Josh that for every song that I really like, there's a song that just doesn't hit me. But much like Matt, I also feel like the stuff that hits is really, really good. Overture and Underture are both... Underture's as good at 10 minutes, and I'm not a long song guy, but if you're going to do 10 minutes, to me, Underture is how you do it. Everything about that is really good in terms of the musicianship, the pacing, the placement on the album. I love it after The Acid Queen, which is another song I really like. You talked about Pinball Wizard, but I'm Free is I think a great Who song along the way. I have always liked Sally Simpson quite a bit as a deep cut Who song as well. And unlike most concept albums, I do think there's a linearity here and a coherence with the story that the music sounds like what's being talked about that is rare in a concept album. It's also important to know that this was released in 1969. And I know earlier you talked about nothing sounded like Tommy that came out. This was ambitious even in an era of ambitiousness. So I always give points for that because it wasn't like the Who were reinventing anybody's wheel. They were inventing their own wheel. And it's funny because I've always thought that the Who and the Kinks were kind of lost at birth in some ways. Like British groups that to some idea wrote about British themes, loved concept albums, loved, the Who Sells Out, Tommy, Quadrophenia, the Kinks, we're going to cover Village Preservation, but we've done a bunch along the way. Lola comes later and stuff. But there's a little bit of that here, with Pete Townsend and, Ray Davies are the guys that were willing to push that envelope and take chances. So I will always give The Who credit for that. You can hear Keith Moon becoming big arena rock drum Keith Moon. As Matt said, the fills are, when you think Keith Moon, the speed of how he drums and the fills are the two things that stand out. And he does what I call the shotgun fill at times, which is the classic Keith Moon, that and then sort of that jazz empty feel, the patter fills, basically this album is just him debuting what you'd hear from him across different albums in the 70s. The songwriting is solid. Pete Townsend, I'm always amazed by how good a guitarist is because I forget sometimes because the rhythm section of The Who is so good. But yeah, he's a really excellent guitar player. And so I would definitely give this a listen if you've never heard it. I can't guarantee you'd like it, and it is a long listen, so you have to be prepared for it. But you really can't write a history of the late 60s without this album. And I think that's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most successful rock opera concept album that there is, although I haven't heard Quadrophenia either. And I was just looking at the movie for that, and that seems intriguing also. But I do like that Matt, you mentioned the overture containing snippets of songs throughout the album, and I do like how they bring that back. They incorporate different song snippets throughout the whole album as well. Or I hear audio cues to reference other songs or maybe even the overture. I think that's well done. Like I said, it's ambitious, but I think the more we listen to these albums from the 60s, the more I appreciate the conciseness and the getting to the point of albums.
And I would say, building off of that, I overall I agree, right? I think it's hard to make a album really good that's also really long, right?
Yeah.
To sustain someone's attention for well over an hour,
right.
Go borderline hour and a half that some records do, whether it's double albums or later on in when in the CD era when there weren't technically a double album, but they were still like almost 80 minutes long, right?
Would you say, Matt, that some of that is because you're not using a discriminating eye in a lot of cases? You're just throwing everything on there, and some of it's just should be left on the heap?
It could be that. It's also just like, I don't know. There's something about the feel of listening to an album where if you're in the 30 to 45 minute range, I don't care what genre you are, how long the songs. If the album is about that length, that feels right. Right. And when you go beyond, once you hit beyond 45, you get into 50 and 60 and beyond. That's like, wow, this is a little bit long. And it's just a general feel. So I think it's hard to make a long album really good. And that's one of the reasons why I like this, or like the Use Your Illusion albums, right? That's another great example, that those are really long albums, but they're so good, right? And so consistent. And I think that can be a hard thing to do. And I think that that's one of the reasons why what makes me like this even more is, even though, yes, I think the probably the first side, and I think it does get a little weaker as it goes on, I would say, as an overall whole. But so I can see why people would be like, oh, this is too much, right? And it's almost like that's what the intention was. But for me, this record, it pretty much hits the whole way. It keeps me interested. There's a lot of variation going on, not just the musicianship, but the songwriting. They're varying the vocals, the structure. You've got short songs. You've got really long jam out songs. It's a little bit of everything. And it's just done so well. The production's really good, just very high quality all around. And it's just, I just really like it. And I'm curious, John, because I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page here. It looks like all the songs are basically Townsend songs with those Entwistle songs. What's the Sonny Boy Williamson? He wrote The Hawker, which is one of my favorite songs on this. Who is this guy? Do you know anything about this?
I don't know a whole lot about him, to be 100% honest. I think that's going to be the definition of a Cleaning the Stacks next week. But I'll look into it because
okay. I just did a quick thing on Wikipedia, and that I think that's probably worth it because it seems like he might have died in 1965. So that song exists. Like, how does that exist?
Well, you know me, I don't like to go long. Well, I'll save that for another time because I don't like to go long on the bios at the beginning. I like the discourse a little more, and there was so much to jam in with this album. But I'll guarantee you, I'll look into that, and I will present next week some things. So instead of being ignorant and trying to fake my way through it, I'll instead admit to not having the background there and kind of come back to it.
I appreciate your dedication to excellence, John. Thank you.
Most excellent.
Yeah.
That's what I'm known for.
Where's the split on the album since you have it up?
Oh, so the first there's 4 sides, right? So side 1 ends with a Hawker and then Christmas and through Underture. So Underture ends the first
Underture
half
is the end of album 1. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts with "Do You Think It's All Right?" and the final track obviously is "We're Not Gonna Take It." So I love it. I loved revisiting it. It had been a while since I had listened to this, and I knew that I liked it, but I don't know, something about, maybe it just hit me right this week. But when I listened to it the 2.5 to 3 times that I listened to it this week, I was just like, man, this is great. I need to listen to this more. So big thumbs up for me.
Nice. Yeah, definitely listen to it once if you've never heard it. I mean, I'm glad I went on the journey, but I don't think I'll be revisiting the album ultimately.
And you know what's interesting? I don't think that any of the takes, and we had 3 different ones, I don't think that any of the takes are wrong. I really do think it kind of comes down to how it hits you. And unlike other ones where we've sort of forcefully agreed or disagree, I don't know if I necessarily agree or disagree with either Josh or Matt on my polarities, because I can see what their take is. And, I would just say this is one, listen to it and be curious to have your feedback to it for those that are listeners. So.
I will say too, just that there's one Keith Moon credited writing track here, which is Tommy's Holiday Camp, which might be the goofiest song on here. I'm like, they gave Keith Moon a writing credit on that. Like that's Keith Moon's like, I got an idea, guys. Hold off, let me just.
I believe the writing credit was because he made a suggestion to Pete Townsend about something, and then Pete Townsend took it and ran with it, and he figured, well, Keith Moon kind of refined that for me, so we'll go ahead and give him a writing credit. It's funny for how much the Who didn't like each other in some ways, unlike say a McCartney and Lennon where they were constantly fighting for that stuff. The Who, on the other hand, would just credit each. That's they were very casual with stuff like that, and they stayed together. So there you go.